Given a day to sit back and digest that 24-6 loss Friday at Minnesota, it tastes just as bad as it did then.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. All right, welcome in. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. You get me solo today. Connor will be back on Monday morning. Well, Minnesota stomped all over Nebraska Friday night, 24-6. You all saw it. It was a debacle, an embarrassment for Nebraska. The Huskers, this Matt Rhule coach team, was flat. I thought uninspired. I thought reminiscent, honestly, of the other appearances that Nebraska has made in the past 8 years at Huntington Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. I was driving back from Minnesota on Saturday, and before I sat down to do this, I wanted to collect my thoughts, give this loss some time to settle. I wanted to watch a full day of college football while I was listening to the first half of college football on the satellite radio as I made my way across the state of Iowa, and then I made it back to see the second half of the Georgia-Ole Miss game. I watched all the games on Saturday night, Alabama, Tennessee. I watched some Texas, Kentucky, saw some bad football there. I watched Iowa, Penn State in the Big Ten. Iowa is coming on consecutive wins against Wisconsin and Penn State now. Saw several other games, and my objective, my point in doing that was to give it some perspective, to give Nebraska's performance some perspective. Where does this fit in the bigger picture of college football? You sometimes get that opportunity in a bye week, and while this wasn't a bye week for Nebraska, it was a Saturday that the Huskers were off, so there was a chance to compare and contrast. And honestly, I didn't come away feeling any better about Matt Rhule's team after watching 3/4 of a day and listening to more college football than I have on any Saturday other than the bye week. Sometimes in this sport in particular, we overreact. You get too high after a win. You get too low when the team loses. It's just the nature of college football. Wins mean so much. Losses can break a season. I'll leave some room to allow that as a possibility. But right now, my feeling about this team after that performance is pretty dark. Just 3 days ago, we were, I think, riding the wave with Nebraska football. It had just come off of back-to-back wins, close wins that were considerably flawed, but we were seeing things about this Nebraska team like toughness and resolve, an ability to play in the fourth quarter and play well and win in the fourth quarter that had not been evident around Nebraska football for quite some time. Dylan Raiola threw 4 touchdowns in that comeback win at Maryland, led a late game-winning drive. That seems today on this Sunday before Nebraska heads into Northwestern week. By the way, we'll talk about Northwestern here in a bit. That seems like a long time ago. It's not that Nebraska lost on Friday night at Minnesota. It's how Nebraska lost. It's not just the score, 24-6. They all count the same. The Huskers were outscored 17-0 in the second half by a Minnesota team that did not dominate against Rutgers, did not dominate against Purdue, or any halfway decent college football team this year until it got to the second half against Nebraska. Think about that. So there are a number of places that we can go with this conversation today, and it's a little bit different not having Connor here. I miss Connor. I wish Connor was here to be able to bounce some things off of. If you missed the Friday show, I had Dirk Chatlin on, former reporter from the Omaha World Herald. We talked about, of course, the Matt Rhule Penn State conversation, which has taken not just a backseat, but like that that conversation is like in the back of the airplane or the bus at this point, not being discussed. And I think that's going to be somewhat refreshing around the Nebraska program. Could it come back? Could it come back? We get into November. That conversation very possibly could come back onto the radar for Nebraska football. Right now, it's just not there. And I think Penn State is going to have its athletic director, Pat Kraft, is going to have to take a wait and see approach with this, if in fact it is Matt Rhule that he targets, because Rhule has to do his part here for the rest of the season in order to be a candidate that Kraft would be able to sell to the Penn State fans and donor alumni base. So we're going to put that on the back burner too. I think that's a good thing. Let's start here with the offensive line for Nebraska. It is the most pressing issue for Nebraska football through 7 games this season. 9 sacks on Friday night. 9 sacks. I spent some time in the press box after the game, after the post-game interviews, trying to look up whether this was, in fact, a school record, the highest number, the largest number of sacks that Nebraska has ever allowed in a single game. And it appears that Nebraska does not list this in its opponent records section of the record book, but I certainly could not find a game in which Nebraska allowed 9 sacks. It was a Minnesota record. The Gophers had never recorded 9 sacks in a game. So I think you get the point. It was a rare event. It was not the fault of one position group or one individual or one assistant coach or one situation, but the offensive line is the culprit more than any other entity. So we can talk about Emmett Johnson getting blown up on a blitz by a linebacker who then took Dylan Raiola down. We can talk about Raiola, who often held the ball too long or, again, did not show the kind of instincts that you would want to see from a seasoned quarterback who has now started 20 games at the Power 4 level and did not step up in the pocket to avoid pressure when the tackles were losing their battles. Or in some cases, the tackles weren't even losing their battles. The tackles were pushing the pressure to the high side of the pocket, and it's Raiola's job in that spot to step up and make a throw. And instead, he was peeling back right into the pressure. We can talk about that because it did happen. It did happen. There were 9 sacks. Like, there was every variety of sack that could have happened in this game. But really, this is about the offensive line breaking down. And the offensive line was dealt some cards on Friday night that it wasn't expecting. Rocco Spindler, Nebraska's starting right guard, the transfer from Notre Dame. In some ways, I would say the emotional leader of this offensive line, the most experienced or among the most experienced, at least among the starters right now, the every down players at Nebraska, the most experienced lineman in college football. He's tasted the most success of any of the Nebraska offensive linemen, right there with Elijah Pritchett, of course, but Spindler played in the national championship game last season. He went out on the first series of the game with a hand injury or a finger injury, and we'll find out more Monday about this from Matt Rhule, but it sounded ominous in the post-game interview. Spindler did not come back. He was hospitalized during the game, did not, of course, make it back to the field, and it could be a long-term thing. It could be a season-ending thing, or it could be a thing because of the location and the nature of the injury where he's able to cast it up and play. I don't know. I don't have a read on this, but Friday night, Nebraska was out without him for essentially the entire game. So Tyler Kanak moved in to the right guard spot. Kanak has been primarily a backup tackle this season. He's playing right guard in this game. And then Elijah Pritchett was ejected later in the first half after a catch downfield. Pritchett was finishing a play. He jumped on a Minnesota defensive player too aggressively. It's something that you see, the kind of block that he made, trying to keep that defender on the ground so that a play downfield, there can be some yards after the catch. But it was right in front of an official, and the big thing is that Pritchett led with his helmet right into the helmet of the defensive player. Immediately, the flag came out. It was a quick review. He was ejected for targeting. The left tackle, then, in addition to the right guard, is gone for Nebraska for the majority of that game. Pritchett will not be suspended for the first half, by the way, against Northwestern. I heard some questions about that after the game. Because it was in the first half, he can play the entire game. Nebraska rotated some things through. Gunnar Gatula primarily stayed on the right side. We saw a lot of Turner Corcoran in the game on Friday night. And frankly, it just did not go well. So what does Nebraska do right now up front on the offensive side in order to try to patch this or try to fix this before you get to Northwestern and then USC and then UCLA? Like there's a gauntlet of athletic, good defenses, athletic players. You'll see that against USC and UCLA, and then strong, sound, good defenses. Somewhat similar to what Minnesota brought to the table. That's what's coming to Memorial Stadium on Saturday when the Huskers play Northwestern. So what do you do? I think Nebraska needs to try to get Donovan Raiola some help. I don't. There's not like some big rash thing that Nebraska is in position to do, that Matt Rhule is in position to do, like he did at this time last year with the entire Nebraska offense. That's just not happening. Like they're not going to make a coaching change, and they're not making a coaching change with anybody in the Raiola family that I can imagine ever. Like this is or while Dylan Raiola is the starting quarterback, you can do some things to help Donovan Raiola. Can you bring somebody in from the outside? He has help among the assistant coaching staff. Can you shift some things around within the structures and responsibilities of the coaching staff so that Donovan Raiola has more help at practice in order to be able to teach the Nebraska offensive line something that they're not doing right now? Because what they're doing right now is not working to avoid sacks. Nebraska quarterback Dylan Raiola, he's been the victim of all of them, has been sacked 25 times this season through 7 games. And in Big Ten games, it has been ugly. You saw Michigan sack Raiola 7 times, Michigan State 5 times, and now 9 against Minnesota. So again, this is not the kind of thing that Nebraska can withstand for the next 5 games. If it goes like this, he's going to get hurt, or you're going to see Nebraska go on a long losing streak like it did a year ago. So, all right, that's the conversation about the offensive line. When we come back, I want to talk about what PJ Fleck did on Friday night that was relatively masterful. It's really what he's done throughout his time at Minnesota when the Gophers play Nebraska. But what is it? What's the strategy, and why does it work against the Huskers? That's coming up next. Right now, I'm in it to tell you about FanDuel. The NFL season is in full swing, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It is an NFL Sunday right now. If you're listening to this episode on Sunday, you can get some things going. On Sunday night, you have Atlanta at San Francisco. Tomorrow on Monday night, the Buccaneers at the Lions, the Texans at the Seahawks. Lots of opportunities for you to make money on FanDuel. It works however you want it to work for you. If you like player props, if you like building a same game parlay or jumping in as the live action unfolds, FanDuel can make that happen. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel to place your first $5 bet now. And a word from Quo. Quo is one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners. It's formerly Open Phone, but this is the same great business phone system that you've heard us talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the number one business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or on your computer. So no more carrying two phones, no more relying on a landline. What's a landline? The built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hour calls, capture leads, and keep your business moving even when you're off the clock. So see why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started for free. Get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's quo.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, we're back. Sunday reaction show. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, talking here by myself. Connor is off this weekend. I cannot find him. He is MIA, but I'm told he has promised me that he will be back and in the saddle for our Monday show, so we can talk more, not just about what happened on Friday at Minnesota, but about what this means for Nebraska moving forward. So I will avoid that subject somewhat on this podcast today. I'm not going to talk about what Northwestern did in shutting out Purdue on Saturday. I'm not going to talk so much about USC and going down at Notre Dame. All right, I'm talking about it, but I'm not going to go into great detail. UCLA comeback win at home against Maryland on Saturday night. So the Bruins have now won 3 games in a row. Nebraska is headed out to the Rose Bowl next month. And then the final 2 opponents on Nebraska's schedule played on Saturday night at Kinnick Stadium. Iowa gets out of there with a 25-24 win. That was Mark Gronowski, the quarterback who Nebraska fans have enjoyed making fun of, or did enjoy making fun of, for the first half of this football season, running free for a gain of 60, 70 plus yards down to the inside the 10 to set up the game-winning touchdown for the Hawks. And then that was Phil Parker's defense pressuring Penn State, not allowing the Nittany Lions to get in position to kick a game-winning field goal in the first game without James Franklin on the sideline. Iowa's here, and Iowa is going to be a problem for Nebraska when Black Friday comes along. So we will get more into that on our Monday show. I want to talk right now about PJ Fleck, because he is a thorn in Nebraska's side, and he's very distinctive in the way that he coaches against Nebraska. This is a conversation that's applicable not just to PJ Fleck, but to other coaches in the Big Ten, because it's a copycat league. And I think PJ, along with Kirk Ferentz, have coined a type of method. They have trademarked a type of method to play against Nebraska and to be effective against Nebraska. If you're not a fan of Nebraska, if you were a fan of Minnesota on Friday night, if you are a fan of Iowa in each one of its 13-10 or 20-17 victories against Nebraska, then it's a beautiful thing for you to watch, to see a team implode, to see a team that has every reason when it comes to assessing the talent on its depth chart and what it's got on the sideline player for player that should beat the team you follow. And then game after game, year after year, that team finds ways to lose the game when it plays your team. It is a beautiful thing for those fans to watch, and it's infuriating for Nebraska fans and for Nebraska coaches and players. The style of play encourages Nebraska to essentially lose its aggressiveness, all because of pace and flow. So what PJ does in this game in particular on Friday is he punts twice on 4th and short near midfield. And if you're watching that game, as I was in the press box at Huntington Bank Stadium, I'm saying, what are you doing, PJ? Why don't you just go for it right now? You're winning at the line of scrimmage. You've got the Nebraska defense on its heels. You're probably going to get it. It's a high percentage play, the way that your team has things going. And if you get it, then you got more of a chance to score on this drive. And isn't it the point of every drive to try to score? Not for PJ Fleck. It's not. For PJ Fleck, the point of every drive is to do a little something that's going to help you later in the game. He said this after the game, that decisions that he makes in the first quarter and in the second quarter, and I would say that this is magnified when he plays Nebraska, are not about what's happening in that moment. Those decisions are about setting a tone, setting something up so that when they get to late in the third quarter and when they get to the fourth quarter, the game goes exactly how they scripted it on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday in their coaches' offices. So what he does with those punts is he forces Nebraska to have to drive 70, 80 yards just to kick 2 field goals in the first half. Dylan Raiola, and we'll talk about Dylan in the third segment, was out there making crazy plays on Friday night. He's throwing left-handed. He's keeping his left hand on the ground and his body elevated from the turf so that he can shovel a football to Isaiah Hunter 7-8 yards downfield and pick up a first down as Dylan is falling to the ground. He's avoiding the rush, making 3 or 4 Minnesota defenders miss so that he can buy time and thread a ball 20 to 25 yards downfield to Luke Lindenmeyer and have everybody in the stadium going, wow, did you see that? These are plays that Dylan made that did not equate to touchdowns. They're plays that he made that Nebraska had to do on Friday night, basically to avoid getting shut out by Minnesota. And that's because of the style that PJ Fleck plays, the pressure that he puts on Nebraska. It doesn't necessarily work against Purdue or Rutgers or Iowa or other teams on Minnesota's schedule. But for whatever reason, when PJ gets into a matchup against a Scott Frost coach team and now twice against a Matt Rhule team, he has an ability to script a game a certain way so that when it gets to the end, you remember Matt Rhule's first game at Nebraska, how the Huskers dominated for 3.5 quarters, and then Minnesota starts to get turnovers and make crazy catches in the corner of the end zone and wins it on a walk-off field goal. Well, the Gophers didn't need those heroics on Friday night because they executed the first half of the game plan better than 2.5 years ago. I would argue this is a better Nebraska team. It certainly is a better Nebraska team that Minnesota played on Friday night than what it faced in August of 2023. It's probably not as good of a Minnesota team led by Athan Kaliak-Manis back then. You have a freshman quarterback now, and while he did some nice things, I'd take Minnesota's 2023 team in all likelihood without studying it. Daniel Jackson on that team over this group of Gophers. But they went out there and they executed the game plan even better. The frustration starts to mount. Minnesota busts one of those long runs with Darius Taylor, 70-something yards, 71 yards down to the 1-yard line. That's their touchdown in the first half. They'll take that and take a halftime lead. Then in the second half, when Nebraska does something, which is with its special teams, which is a new development for Nebraska this year that extended into Friday night, strong special teams play. Archie Wilson punts it down to the 2-yard line. At this point, Nebraska's trailing just 7-6. Yeah, it feels like the Huskers are kind of a mess and nothing's really going right. They're not turning the ball over, but like they're still in the game. It's 7-6. It may feel like a 10-point game, but it's a 1-point game. And then you punt it to force Minnesota to start at its 2-yard line. This should have been the turning point for Nebraska, but not with PJ Fleck calling the shots for Minnesota because this is what he wants. This is where he wants to see Minnesota. 98-yard touchdown drive. It's a backbreaker. Minnesota's up 14-6. It might as well have been up 44-6 at that time. Nebraska, which has avoided penalties all year, starts drawing flags. Holding call on Donovan Jones on a 4th down throw. Now, if he doesn't hold, does that receiver catch the ball and move the sticks? Very possibly. He had a grasp of that receiver's left hand. He was the intended target on the play. It's not one of those holding or DPI calls where you go, oh my goodness. If he just falls to the ground, the defensive player, then there's no flag and the drive is over. No, I think that impacted the play. But the drive keeps going. Nebraska makes a mistake. Minnesota gets into the end zone on a great throw and catch. Next drive, Nebraska's still in this. It's still a 1-score game. It's 14-6. There's a DPI downfield to keep the drive going on a 3rd down play that if not called would have led to a Minnesota punt. The Huskers are just playing right into PJ Fleck's hands. They're hurting their own cause. It was masterful stuff from the Minnesota head coach. All right, that's what I wanted to say about PJ Fleck. Nebraska is 5-2. Coming out of this game, 2-2 in the Big Ten. Got Northwestern coming into Lincoln on Saturday. When we come back for the final segment on this solo edition of a Locked On Nebraska podcast reaction show, I'm going to talk about whether the Huskers were distracted, whether Matt Rhule was distracted in this game because of all that was happening around his program in the days leading up to it. That is next. Right now, a word from Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what those accounts are worth, whether it's a 401k, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you're putting off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. It does the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data, visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch can help you identify that you're not saving as much as you thought, discover forgotten accounts from previous jobs, or it can increase your saving rates. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year with Monarch Money, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege. Welcome back. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. It is Sunday. This is a reaction episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I am flying solo today, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube. If you are doing that, thank you. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Thank you for listening on all of the audio platforms, whether it's Apple or Spotify. We appreciate it. Connor will be back with me on Monday to go over what this Nebraska loss means for the Huskers the rest of the season. They will, of course, be aiming for bowl eligibility Saturday as Northwestern visits Memorial Stadium. Hey, I wanted to say thanks to some of the people that I saw up in Minnesota. Ran into a ton of listeners and viewers of the podcast around Minneapolis and around the Minnesota campus. It's amazing to me, and I know Connor feels the same way, as we are out in the public, whether it's in Omaha or Lincoln, and then the last couple of weeks going on the road and just finding people who come up and say, hey, love the podcast, keep it up, I listen, I watch you guys all the time. So legitimately very much appreciated. Saw some parents of some players. Shout out to the parents of Luke Lindenmeyer and Makai Nelson for saying hello and telling us that you listen. So if you guys are listening and you feel the same way that all of them do, tell your friends about the Locked On Nebraska podcast. We have an exciting final 6 weeks of the season to come. And then, of course, it's going to be coaching carousel season. It's going to be transfer portal season. So much that's coming up that's worth your time and energy to seek us out. So thanks again. All right. Speaking of December and coaching carousel season, you may have heard that Penn State is in the market for a head football coach after James Franklin was fired a week ago today. It's been a week as we come to you on Sunday, October 19th. It's the 19th. Yes. Since James Franklin has been fired. I don't know about you, but I feel like that he's been out of a job for like 6 months with the way that that time has moved over the last week. Listen to Franklin on College Game Day on Saturday morning as I was definitely still in Minnesota. Now I may have crossed into the Iowa territory at that point in my rental vehicle. And yeah, this is kind of a thing that Jimmy Sexton's clients do after they're fired. You saw it with Lane Kiffin a few years ago. They go onto the College Game Day set if it happens during the season, and they get to kind of present things from their point of view. This was not like a super Penn State friendly. It was not an ad for Penn State at all. Saturday, not a great day for Penn State to have James Franklin on the set of College Game Day to then lose to Iowa, a fourth consecutive loss for Penn State. I was most interested by what Nick Saban said about the situation. And yeah, a coach is going to stick up for a coach, but Saban was harsh and did not hold back in his disappointment, in his admonishment. They didn't call out Pat Kraft by name or the Penn State administration, any of those administrators by name, but it wasn't a great look for what Penn State did in firing Franklin 6 games into a season after he took the Nittany Lions within one victory of playing for the national championship. So that is what it is. That was a very Franklin friendly environment there in that interview. If you haven't heard it, I'd go check it out. It sheds some light just on like what the process was for him to lose his job. And he talked about his family, and in the mind of Matt Rhule, who was mentioned, of course, last week as the leading candidate or a leading candidate for this job at his alma mater. Family is a big thing. I'm sure as Rhule ponders this situation, and I mean, he's just thinking about it, whether he's had a conversation with Pat Kraft or not. He's you could tell. I will say this, and this gets me into the point I want to make. You could tell through the week, and I don't just mean Monday, when Matt Rhule answered 5 or 6 questions at his lead off the week press conference about the Penn State job and spoke on his feelings for the Nittany Lions and for Franklin and for Pat Kraft. You could tell throughout the week, could see it in his body language when he came to the podium on Wednesday that there were things that were weighing on him. I don't mean that there was a decision weighing on him. That's not what I mean. I just mean the environment around Matt Rhule changed. The conversation around Matt Rhule changed last week. It became multi-pronged, where the week before, 2 weeks before that, all through the offseason, it was tunnel vision, focused on what you can do for Nebraska, all about Nebraska to take this year 3 jump. And then last week, there was a fork in the road, and so there were 2 roads that led off from that fork. And one of those roads in conversational topics was about Penn State, and the other one was about Nebraska. And that's really unfortunate timing for Nebraska, because coming off its first last-minute come-from-behind win in 8 years, Nebraska had a real opportunity last week before it went to Minnesota on that short week to take some of that momentum and to build throughout the week a kind of energy where you could just pick up where you left off late in the game at Maryland and have a chance, I think, to dictate things against Minnesota. And there are a few opponents on the Nebraska schedule. There are perhaps no opponents on the Nebraska schedule, and I'll include Iowa in this, where it's more important for Nebraska to dictate the start of the game. It allowed Minnesota to dictate the start of the game. I don't know about the plan for Nebraska offensively on its first possession. Nebraska gets a 3-and-out to start, takes the ball, 3 passes, and a punt. Last week at Maryland was about establishing the run. It was about sending a message. It was about setting the tone. It was about saying, hey, Maryland, you're not going to be able to come after us with your standout pass rush, because we're going to run the ball up the middle between the tackles, and we're going to slow that thing down. Minnesota on paper didn't have the same kind of pass rush that Maryland did, but clearly it was a dangerous pass rush for the Nebraska offense to face. Maybe it wouldn't have been as dangerous if the Huskers weren't without their 2 high-priced transfer offensive linemen for the entire second half of that game and much of the first half of that game. But something was not clicking for Nebraska. A lot was not clicking for Nebraska on the offensive side. I just didn't feel like there was energy. And this is easy for me to say in hindsight. I watched Nebraska get off the bus and walk into Huntington Bank Stadium 2.5 hours before kickoff on Friday night. I didn't feel like there was a ton of energy right there with Matt Rhule coming off of the bus. It didn't look to me like they had fire in their eyes as they went through the warm-ups on Friday night in the afternoon. Maybe that's just the effect of not being at home, the effect of playing 2 consecutive games on the road, of having a short week after you get back late on Saturday night from Maryland. Sorry, like, you're highly paid, highly trained athletes. You got to do a better job of getting in the right frame of mind, getting up, being pumped, being ready to go every game. And if your coaches have to be a part of making that happen, well, they should be. And I think generally at Nebraska this year under Matt Rhule, they have been. Something was off about Friday, and I will theorize that it had a lot to do with the way that the week went. I don't think the Nebraska players were so much impacted and out of rhythm because media were talking about Matt Rhule's potential candidacy at Penn State, but I think Rhule was off. I think it was just a different kind of week for him. And he can correct that. He can get right back into his mindset. I imagine as he sits in the office this weekend, Nebraska's practicing on this Sunday. They took Saturday off, came back, took Saturday off, and then normal Sunday of practice today as I record this. Monday will be another off day, the normal off day during the week. Players are around on Monday. They're in there doing their things. They don't have a practice on Monday. So these 72 hours after this loss, I imagine, are going to give Matt Rhule a lot of time to think about that game and think about everything that went into that game. I talked to somebody this weekend who was around the Baylor program in Matt Rhule in 2019. And it came up in our conversation that in that Sugar Bowl that Baylor played against Georgia on January 1 of 2020 when Rhule was a candidate to leave for the NFL, that his team just didn't have its normal flow, its normal mojo, its normal energy, its normal focus. It didn't have the same kind of vibe that allowed Baylor to play well and play a certain style throughout that 2019 season. And that in hindsight, a lot of it was because of what Matt Rhule had going on the side, or conversations that were occurring about things happening outside of Baylor. It ultimately resulted in him leaving for the Carolina Panthers. That was way farther down the road in late December 2019 than this situation right now with Rhule in Penn State, whatever the situation is or will become. I think something similar was going on. I think that attention was divided, and it impacted Nebraska's ability to be ready and play with the kind of focus and energy that it needs. It needs against Minnesota, because Minnesota is laser focused on its plan, and it feels like it's confident. PJ Fleck is confident, and it trickles down to the players that they are confident in knowing how they beat Nebraska. I think a lot of us thought around the Nebraska program that the Huskers were past that the Huskers were past being a pawn in PJ Fleck's game plan, in one of the pieces that he can move around with the little decisions that he makes throughout the week and early in the game, that Nebraska wouldn't beat itself when it came down to it, and that they would find a way to be the better team, to rise above that. I didn't expect it was going to be a blowout, but I thought Nebraska would show its growth in the fourth quarter, and it was quite the opposite. It was less competitive than the first time Matt Rhule took a team to Minneapolis. All right, I've said enough. On Monday, Connor will be back alongside me. Can't wait to chat with him about what we see for Nebraska moving forward now at 5-2. Will Nebraska be favored in more than one game the rest of the season? I don't know, as I sit and look at this on Sunday morning. So there's a tease for you about what we may discuss on our Monday show. Thank you again for listening and watching the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig Sheeman is there to break down the most exciting conference in college sports. Can't argue that after this weekend, from the rivalries to the championships and everything in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.